Okay, so now that we have all of our initial instructions on how to create a Google Sheet, and we have everything all set to go on that. So hopefully all of you should have a Google Sheet opened up. So what we'll do is we'll work through some examples so that you get more familiar with using these Google Sheets and Google functions. Now we're going to start with some really basic calculations. So it's going to be a little bit more, what should we say, instructive in the sense that I'm going to go slowly step by step. And the reason is intentional because things like Google spreadsheets and Excel spreadsheets and all of those software, so they're very particular in how we enter all our content. Okay, so if we make some small mistakes, Google might not tell us that, hey, you made a mistake. All right, so we want to make sure that all the calculations we enter here, they're correct. So we will be going a little bit slowly. Okay, so let's start with the first math example. So in the Google Sheet that you have opened up, so enter the following numbers in the cells number labeled A1 through A5. So that means we are looking at the first column and the first 5 rows. So in those 5 cells, enter these numbers. And then enter the numbers in cells B1 through B5. So now these are going to be entered in the second column, that's titled B. And then I'm going to enter these numbers in rows 1 through 5. Okay, so let's see how that would work. So I can go ahead, I have this blank sheet, so I'm going to go ahead and blow it up a little bit so we can all see all these numbers. Okay, so here's my row column A. Okay, so and in the first 5 rows, I'm going to enter these numbers 1, 2, and so on. Okay, so there, I've entered these 5 numbers in these 5 cells. Then in column B, I'm going to be entering these numbers. So here I go. So I enter those values. Okay, so now I've entered the values in cells A1 through A5 and B1 through B5. Now I'm going to go ahead and add all of these values in cells C1 through C5. Now remember that the symbol that we'll use to denote addition is this plus symbol. So in cells C1 through C5, we are going to enter these formulas. Now, the one thing that you should always remember is that in Google Sheets, we have to enter this equal to sign first to tell Google Sheets that, hey, I'm entering a formula. Okay? So let's go ahead and see how that would work. So I can go here and then first enter the equal to sign, and then I can, instead of typing it all out, I can use a mouse, and then I can just scroll to this cell A1, and then you can see it shows up A1. And then I'm going to add, so I'm going to put the plus sign, and then I can click on the next cell that I'm going to add, which is B1. So click on that. Now here you can see I've entered the formula. Okay, and then once I've done, I'll press the enter or the return button, and I have my answer here. Now I can go ahead and enter the other formulas here manually, okay, just like how we did, for example. So I can press this equal to, and then I can press this, followed by the plus sign, followed by this cell, okay. Now, if you're using the same formula, we don't have to always type them all out. What I can do is, I can just do this drag and copy, and that will automatically copy the formulas. So for example, I'm highlighting the cell here, okay, in C2. And then if you see this dot right at the bottom, when I hover over it, you can see the cursor changes to a plus. Then I can keep my left tab on the mouse pressed, and then I can just drag it down. And then you can see all the formulas are copied. Okay, so you can see here, so it is equal to A5 plus B5. Okay, so I can either go ahead and type them all out myself, okay, or I can go ahead and do this drag and copy. and that will automatically copy all the formulas. Now, one of the things that we should keep in mind is if we are entering formulas, we should always make sure that we start off with this equal to sign. So what happens if we don't do it? So let me go ahead and see here. So let us suppose I say I don't have the equal to sign. I'm simply going to say A1 plus B1. And you can see it is actually not doing the calculation. It is showing it as a text. So if I don't put the equal to sign, Google Sheets doesn't know that it's a formula. So it's going to take whatever you have input as a text, okay, which is not what we want to do. So that's why whenever we put formulas, always remember to start off with this equal to sign. Okay. So now let's go ahead and work through another example. Okay. So we are going to go ahead and work through several of these examples. Okay. And as we said, the reason is we want to know how these calculations work. And once we know how these calculations work, it's going to make our life so much easier. We can better understand what all those financial formulas are doing, what those financial decisions actually involve. Okay. So now let's look at the second math operation. So we're going to subtract the numbers. And as we said before, the symbol for subtraction in Google Sheets is this minus sign. Okay. Is this minus sign. And we know what we're going to expect, right? We are having the same values in both columns A and B. So when I'm subtracting them, I'm basically subtracting the same number from itself. So I should be left with 0. So I can go ahead and enter my formula, remembering to input with, starting with the equal to sign, and then take the cell reference here, minus this cell, and you can see I have my answer here. And then instead of typing, I can simply click here and drag and drop. So now I have all of these subtraction formulas entered in. Okay. Now, if I want to go ahead and do a few different types of calculations, what can I do? I can go ahead and see what will happen if I change these values. Okay. So let us say I'm going to change the values in cells A1 to A5. Instead of having 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, what happens if I change them to 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50? What you'll see is, because I entered all of them as formulas, the results are going to automatically change to reflect the new numbers. So let's see how that will work. So I can change this to 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. And what you can see is these results in the addition and the subtraction columns, so they're all automatically changed. Okay, so that is the advantage of using formulas to enter all of these things. Okay, so now let's go ahead and work through a couple of more examples. So we can go ahead and see what happens if you want to divide the numbers. Use the mathematical symbol for division, which is this /. So which is, you can see here, it's this sign here, okay? And then I can go ahead and do the multiplication where I'm going to enter it as a star. So let's go ahead and see how that works. So I can do the division, so that equals this cell divided by this. And then I can change these back to what they were originally, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, and then I'll have the multiplication column here, starting with the equal to sign, time, so that will be this cell, times that. So remember, to access the star symbol, you have to keep the shift and pressed while you press the number 8. okay? And here I'm dragging and copying the formulas, and now you can see all the answers for the addition, the subtraction, the division, and the multiplication. And then we can change these numbers, and you can see all of those values change automatically, okay? So this is basically what they should look once I have made all of these changes, okay? So here's my original values. And if I change the inputs in column A to 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, this is how the answer should look like, okay? And then if I change it instead to 5, 10, and 18, then this is basically how it should look like, okay? So go ahead and try all of these calculations and make sure that you're getting these numbers. Now, one of the things I would like to highlight here is when I'm going ahead and doing this multiplication here, what are we essentially doing? I am multiplying the number with itself. So basically what you're doing is you're squaring the number. Squaring simply means you're multiplying the same number twice. So if I'm squaring 2, that means I'm multiplying 2 with a 2, and the answer should be 2 times 2, that equals 4. If I'm squaring a 3, so squaring simply means we're going to multiply the same number twice. So I'm going to multiply the 3 twice. So 3 times 3, that should equal 9. Okay? So we can go ahead and make sure that when we do all of these calculations, so that's the output I should get. All right? So hopefully that once we work through those numbers, hopefully that will make us more comfortable with using spreadsheets. Now, there's one useful tip that I have when we use spreadsheets, okay? So when we are entering formulas, so the first method, and that's a method that we had used, we were using cell reference numbers. So we said, for example, in this cell, multiply A1 by B1. So we entered it as A1 star B1. The second method, what we could do, we could actually use numbers instead of cell references. So if I see here, so when I'm going ahead and saying, hey, here enter this formula, which is, I can make that back to 1, okay? So when I'm saying go ahead and multiply these two numbers, so here's the multiplication column. So I'm using the cell references, okay? But I know what I'm really doing is I'm multiplying this 1 with a 1. So I could simply enter it as a formula, and then instead of using the cell reference, use the actual values. And you can see I get the same answer. So why should I use these cell references rather than the actual numbers? Well, if I were to go ahead and change this to a 10, 10 times a 1, the answer should be 10. But you can see when I entered the formula as an actual number, it did not change because it still is 1 times 1, right? I entered this as numbers, not as a cell reference. So the advantage of going ahead and entering formulas using cell references is when the input values change, Google Sheets will automatically recalculate the answers for you. That does not happen if I'm actually entering them as values, like numbers, okay? So that is why, as far as possible, enter the formulas using these cell references like A1, B1, and so on.